and strategic initiatives. I'm delighted to be joined by two speakers that lead fintech associations in their respective countries. Ochiai-san, who's the vice chairman of the Fintech Association of Japan, and Sugan Saxena, who's the CEO of the Fintech Association for Consumer Empowerment in India. And we particularly thought that it would be interesting to pick, Japan and India as two markets to compare and contrast because they have very different market ecosystem characteristics, but also have taken approaches that focus on protection as well as innovation. So with that, welcome Sugandh and Ochiai-san. Thank you so much for joining this panel.
So thank you for invitation to this panel. So as introduced, I'm from Fintech Association of Japan. So we have around 400 companies as member companies, and happy to contribute. So this very important discussion about open finance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jayashree. And my name is Sugandh. I'm from Fintech Association for Consumer Empowerment. We're also a fintech body in India with over 280 plus members. And we're also recognized as a self-regulatory organization in the fintech sector by our central bank in India. Obviously, the topic is close to our heart and looking forward to the discussion today.
Great. So I'm going to start with the definitional question because often, and just to give you a background, Financial Inclusion Week brings together so many different stakeholders. I think there's a group that is very much embedded in the fintech ecosystem, and then there's a group that's beginning to learn about this. So just to set the context right, we hear the terms open banking and open finance often used interchangeably. And you're both experts that advise regulators in your respective countries and have contributed to various reports. As experts, how do you describe open finance? I'm not going to ask you to define it, but how do you describe open finance? And why do you think it's important for inclusive finance across the world today? And either of you can go. It's a question to both of you.
I can start So I guess the way we look at it, data being very fundamental to provision of digital financial services. And I think we are not too far where we would see more and more companies, even traditional ones, using data. So data then becomes foundation to understand the consumer and therefore provide them right kind of financial services. So open finance we see as that sort of super connector in some ways, if you can call it, which will provide right channel to both the consumers or the MSMEs, small businesses, to share their data, and then on the other side, you have users who would be using this data. We see that banking, of course, is a very very important data because it's a financial transaction data which has super rich value for the users, but given that a lot of people in our country may not have transaction data that kind of rich and therefore need lot of alternative data, we feel that open finance is much more wider term, and therefore lot of conversation is moving from a narrow banking thing to or open finance thing. So I'll pause here. Over to you.
Yes. So in Japan, we started open finance activity from type of open banking. So we set up revised Banking Act in 2017. So there are around 8 years experience about open finance. And so after the revision of Banking Act, around by 2020, more than 130 banks are providing their banking APIs to fintech startup companies. Not only fintech startup, but also some of the financial institutions are using other financial institutions financial APIs. But so mainly, so our open finance coverage is banking sector. So we need to expand so more broad open finance ecosystem, such as credit card, type of the so e-money, and also or so security, insurance. Such type of the other than banking sector, we set up the type of the so basic policy in cabinet office. This summer, and so at first, we are discussing about so credit card or open finance, and next, such as security and insurance. So this is a very developing discussion, and would like to exchange the situation with other countries experience.
No, thank you both. And I do want to refer to the fact that, both India and Japan have very different market characteristics. I mean, India in the last decade has really jumped forward in terms of its inclusion priorities, and that's generated its own data trails. But Japan has historically had high mobile phone penetration, high banking access. Just from where you both sit, how do you see open finance ecosystems evolving in your countries? How do you see the different policy priorities, and how do you then navigate some of the challenges that you might encounter? Because I imagine, in a country where a lot of people have just been included, the focus should be on protecting personal information even while you drive open finance initiatives. Whereas in a country like Japan, I imagine the focus would be much more on competition, ensuring a level playing field.
Mm.
So how do you manage these different policy priorities, and what
Uh,
are some of the challenges your members encounter?
mm. Yeah, at first, yeah, from Japan. Yeah, so as you mentioned, so we have a so strong coverage about banking account from so many citizens. So more than 90% of citizens have banking account, not without fintech business, before fintech business. Yeah, so we need to change the type of the user interface and user experience, and also type of the improvement of the type of the competitiveness of the banking and financial sectors. So this is a very important topic to proceed such open finance, and also there there are some minor people in these days, such as there are growing foreigners in Japan. So some of the foreigner uh, cannot make good access to a banking account, and also payment services. So inclusion, including such foreigner, is one of the challenge for Japanese fintech scene. So this may be type of the Japanese typical situation based on uh, type of the so type of traditional strong banking sector.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Sugandh, on the India
Yeah,
situation.
yeah. So, just coming back to the first question, I think even in India, like the account aggregator framework, this is how we call open finance, is really confluence of, not just the banking data, but, data from the capital markets, data from insurance, pension, and so on. So that was the original idea. As of now, what we see is the banking sector has taken the lead. So there's more companies which are providing transaction data which is available. But as you rightly said, in 10 years, the access has really, almost universal when it comes to banking. And therefore, I think in some sense, both inclusion and competition are sort of go hand in hand. And I say that because when, financial access is also not good enough. Like we have seen that a lot of people may have access but they may not use it, and this is where incentive for providers come in, where they say that can we use this data and provide them more sort of suitable and more customized tailor-made services. And as with Japan, I think we started similar time, 2017, but in last 3 years, when the open finance has really taken off. So some of the data tells us that more than 700 companies which are part of this ecosystem, and there's a lot of consent, something like 250 million plus consent are being given, and so on. But if you look at the unique customers, they are still perhaps somewhere like 50 million. For a country like which has maybe 900 million adult, this is still very very small. So obviously there is a very long way to go when more and more financial services start using this kind of data to provide more suitable services for them. The other part which we are seeing sort of evolving in our space is very strong focus from the regulator side and industry as such to ensure that this data is used responsibility. So while we understand that this data is really important, but we do not want to solve for privacy and security later on, because you can't really do that. So this is something which has to starts in the beginning, and therefore as industry and as a regulator, they are putting in sort of standard to ensure that how this data could be used, and there's a lot of framework in place to ensure that the consumer trust in this open finance remain by providing all these things. Third element, I guess, for us is really the viability of the ecosystem. For now, I think there are about 16 account aggregator, and there is a large universe of financial information users and providers. But that is something which is still not perhaps completely figured out. So as we go forward, this becomes more and more sort of pervasive in terms of digital financial services. We will see how this could potentially lead to everybody has enough incentive in the ecosystem. We saw something in US market a month back where we saw the largest player saying they want to charge it or something like that. So
Yeah.
as a group, I guess it's important for all the stakeholders to think through that what kind of mechanisms are at place to ensure that there's a right kind of monetization happening. And finally, I think, just from a ecosystem point of view, in some sense, we are seeing not just a financial open finance, but, there are conversation already happening to use this framework to gather more data. We already saw GSTN, which is in India, the tax-related data on MSMEs, which is integrated in the whole ecosystem. And there are conversations happening to get more, different kind of financial data, not non-financial data also to come in, which will make it, even superior experience from a customer perspective and also from a private players perspective. Interestingly, India's DPDPA Act, which has come last year, and we are expecting rules anytime soon. It also talks about the consent manager, where this kind of framework would be used for consumers to allow their use of data, and then with consent with all the parties. So there's a lot of moving piece for us also in terms of how these different things shape in the market in some sense. But fundamentally, what we are seeing is that customer consent based architecture for consumers to share their data in a very safe, privacy oriented way is something where the overall industry is moving. So yeah, this is for now.
No, that's great. I have two follow-up questions for both of you. One is, in Japan, Uchai-san, how did you encourage incumbents to share their data? Existing banks that already had a lot of data. What is the incentive, and how did you make sure that they were willing to share their data with some of the data users who are fintech startups or tech firms or newer payment service providers? And then, Sugandha, I have a follow-up question for you too, which is you did mention that in India, of the 900 million adults, we just have 50 million unique users. What can help increase, the number of unique users?
Mm.
And then a question to both of you, which is on the viability question, because how do you see some of these business models or pricing mechanisms evolving?
Um, Yeah. So I'd like to answer two questions. So for first question, So before open banking activity in 2017, so some of startup company provided uh, their services type of the account aggregation service to individuals and SMEs. So some of fintech companies had already got more than some million users. Yeah, before banking legislation, there is actual business about using banking data. Of course, such type of the accessing data was done by scraping. So this is not a safe way. So financial service agency introduced the banking act in order to shift from such screen scraping to banking APIs. So this is a very type of the starting point for discussion. And so in relation to shifting such a scraping user to API user, we need to ensure the continuity of the services. So Japanese government set up the type of the national purpose of the national KPIs of banking API 2070 by Prime Minister Abe's approval. Yeah, so more than 80 banks should provide banking API by 2020. This was a type of the very first plan, not only from financial service agency, but also type of the whole country's KPIs for banking sector. And also financial service agency itself is very strong regulator in Japan. Compared to other ministries in Japan, FSA is so strong. And so their type of the request is very effective against the banking sector. So type of regulation only set up type of voluntary obligation for banks, but a combination of the national KPIs and strong recommendation from financial service agency, type of the what's the important uh, uh, reason to proceed such banking APIs. And based on the type of actual fintech services for more than million users. So this is a very important fact for discussing with banking sector and fintech companies and regulator. And next, as for next question, yeah, price problem is very essential. So we don't have such as portability right in Japan, not a strong data portability right. Of course, individuals have some rights to disclose information against any type of the business operator, including banks. But price such individual rights stipulated in Personal Information Protection Act is not so strong. So fintech companies need to discuss with uh, uh, so type of bank, many banks and other financial institutions. Uh, but in parallel of such negotiation in private sector, our competition authority published report about so application of so such a competition laws into so banking sector. So this includes the so price negotiation problem. So this is also very strong friend for fintech companies. Yeah, so jointly, so such financial service agency and also so JFTC promotes such type of the so price negotiation between banks and fintech companies. But of course, so Japanese bank sector have so very long historical systems. So such systems are not modernized in some cases. So they need to take so much cost to make APIs and also maintain their API. Yeah, so actually, some of many of fintech companies are paying some amount about fee for using banking API, but such fee is so something so very limited or fee structure. So of course, so startup company uh, uh, could continue their business. Considering such paying fee to banks. Yeah. So this is so Japanese situation.
Great, thank you. Sugandh? I had,
Yeah,
your question was the 50 million, how do we increase the gap? And then the
yeah.
pricing.
So I think it's still very early days. It's just last 3 years when we have really seen this ecosystem evolving. See, it's a typical network ecosystem, right? Unless everybody is providing data, lot of users cannot use it because they have to almost run parallel rails. Because if my consumers is with X bank and not with the Y bank, and X is providing, but then for Y I have to create a separate rail. So I think it's a chicken and egg situation that unless lot of large providers of data, which are banks and other financial companies, do not come on board, you will see this problem. There has been big push from the regulators and government authorities to really get industry on board, and which we have seen happening. The other factor which I think, so which you will see really now more and more companies using this as a platform to capture consumers data. And second thing I think is um, a lot of this was driven by the sell side, right? So it was them who were nudging consumers to do that. But with data protection bill coming, and there's a lot of awareness now, especially because of the frauds we have seen in our country, that data is really something which people have to protect, and they have responsibility to in a safe and secure way. You will also perhaps see consumer moving in that direction, and therefore they will come where, as a consumer, we will say that we would only want to share data in this way and not give you the photocopies and the PDFs and so on. It's far-fetched at this point. It looks like far-fetched, but I do feel that with a lot of customer education efforts, which both regulator, government bodies and industry will do, you will see exponential sort of growth there. So I think two factor, as once the system is complete with all the players, you will see massive change in that direction. Yeah. And on the viability, I guess, again, we are, as a country, I think, is still figuring out on that. Obviously, in that context, it's becomes very important that, we use, infrastructure in an optimal way, because, from a provider side, I think you would want as much data as possible, but that may not be optimal for somebody who is sharing their data. So I think some discipline is required to make it reasonable, and ensure that it does not create a lot of huge costs for incumbents. Having said that, I think customer demand in some sense would really be the driver, and some sort of system, I think industry will find a dynamic way to adjust things. So not at that stage, but I think conversations are happening in that.
Thank you. And I mean, clearly, you've just spoken about the different challenges as well as bottlenecks when it comes to open finance in each of your ecosystems. And I can see how your work is cut out as people that lead fintech associations. I do want to shift and end on a slightly positive note. So I want to talk about, if you were to think about both your respective countries as well as Asia more broadly, what is the one development that you think is going to impact the future of open finance? What are you excited about?
Yeah, yes, yes. So for Japan, so there is type of the so big uh, factor is developing generative AI. So this is very important for society and the government to how to make good environment for such generative AIs, especially in banking sector. So yeah, it's very difficult in some cases to agree on sharing data. Between financial institutions and fintech companies or other cases. But in order to make good generative AI, yeah, we need to certain good data access to sector specific data. So what it's so this is a very important topic for uh, many type of the stakeholders. So we can share the necessity of the sharing data, and the Japanese government will submit new data regulation next year. So this is not only data protection regulations. So to make environment for sharing data, such as European Data Act, but not so we are considering another type of the mechanism to share data. One of the important area for new data regulation is banking sector. This is derived from the emergence of the generative AI. I think generative AI is very important for the necessity of the open finance and open data.
It's great. Sukhan?
Yeah, I would think, from a consumer perspective, when I have something as simple as, uh, choosing a dish on a restaurant menu, something like I can really choose how I want to share my data, where my data is going, and, ingredients of it in a very seamless way. It's something which we should aspire for, because the kind of fraud ecosystem we are seeing, it's extremely extremely critical that we have this ecosystem which allows safe sharing of data. And I would also second what Tochi said about generative AI in a country where not everybody is understanding English and may not have lot of uh, tech understanding, or a lot of understanding of financial services. Can we use generative AI to really empower consumers to use data in a right way and know where it is going, what is happening, and so on? So it's a wish list of sort, but perhaps worth pursuing.
That's great. We have 2 minutes remaining. I want to give you both 30 seconds to just do a little bit of a visioning exercise. So imagine it's 2030, so 5 years from now. Can you describe how you see open finance changing the lives of people in Asia?
Yeah, I think access of the uh, banking sector and other financial institutions will be improved by next 5 years. Yeah, so of course, we have a strong financial sector, but for some younger generations, they are not good at visiting actual bank's branch. Yeah, so they would like to access in virtual way to very useful banking applications or financial institutions applications. So this is what their rights will be uh, uh, so uh, so used in actual way. Yeah. We need to make good environment for younger age. They are born in the very digital age. Digital native. Yeah. So we are setting up a good environment for digital native.
That's great. Sugandh.
Yeah, I would also think that we have a long road in terms of access to other financial services like credit, insurance, and especially as India's demographic change in terms of pension and wealth generation kind of opportunity. So if this scales, we I personally think that more financial services is something which should happen, not just saving or the credit, which obviously are the building block, but as a family and as an individual, I think we need much more financial services for good reasons, and that should happen through this ecosystem.
Great. Thank you both so much for this. Really, I learned a lot although it was a really short time. So thank you again, and hope to stay in touch with you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.